What's up guys, it's Ronnie the Realtor here, and we're switching gears from what we've been doing on some of our other videos. We've been talking a lot about investing, and if you do want to learn more about investing, you can click the link above where we'll link you to our investment series. But today we're going to talk to our friends out there who are maybe wanting to buy a house, who've been thinking about buying versus renting. And I'm going to answer tonight one of the biggest questions that I get about real estate, which is, should I buy a house? Now, I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version right up front. I'm going to give you the too long, didn't read version, if you will. And that is, if you're going to plan on being in the same spot for at least 5 years, in most cases, buying is a good decision. If you're going to be there less than 5 years, you might still come out better by buying versus renting, but you'll just have to proceed with caution. So, with all that being said, let's get down into it. And let's talk about, should I buy or should I rent? And more importantly, why? Renting and owning both have pros and cons. And we'll discuss in depth for the rest of this video what those pros and cons kind of are. And in a separate video, we're going to actually work out a hypothetical rent versus buy situation. And as a matter of fact, it won't even be hypothetical. I'm actually going to use a real deal that I've done, and we'll analyze the numbers from that, show you some pictures of the house, stuff like that. Now, we'll tell you that different markets have different pricing and everything else, but the rent and payment ratio will, in a lot of cases, remain close to the same. But that's another conversation for another day. Okay, we'll stay focused on the topic at hand, which is, should I buy or should I rent? Now, one other piece of business that I do want to get out of the way before we get into this video is this. If you're finding the content that we post on here useful, if you find it beneficial or helpful, do me a favor and click the subscribe button, and click the like button, and click the little bell icon so that you get all the future updates. Also, if you have questions about the buying process or maybe a unique situation that you would like to have me answer, post it in the comments. Let me read about it and let's get a conversation going. But without further ado, let's get into the meat and potatoes of our video here. We're going to talk a little bit about the pros and cons of renting, and then hopefully based on that you can sort of decide which option is best for you. We're going to start with renting. Renting does have certain pros, and we'll talk about those briefly here. Number one, flexibility. If you have to have the ability to pick up and move within a relatively short period of time, renting is a great option. It really is. Rent property does have its place, and it's typically for those kinds of folks who need a place to live, but maybe aren't going to be there long term. Maybe you're planning on staying in one spot for a year. Some people even come to a new market and rent for a year while they're checking out the area and figuring out where it is they want to buy and what it is that they want to buy. So if you need flexibility, renting is a good option. Number two, you are not responsible for maintenance items. If the air conditioner breaks, you don't have to worry about it. If the roof springs a leak, you don't have to worry about it. If a pipe bursts and the whole house floods, well, that's still your problem a little bit, but you don't have to pay for fixing it. Hopefully your stuff won't get damaged and you won't be responsible for it. So if you don't like the idea of having maintenance items to deal with, renting can be a good option. Now, I will say this. When you own a home, there are certain ways to mitigate that risk, and we'll talk more about those in another video. And as a matter of fact, I talk about a little bit of that in one of my investing videos that I'll link up here too. So you can check that out if you like. The third pro for renting is that you have less expense up front in most cases. Now, I will tell you this. When you rent something, you usually have to pay a deposit, and most of the time you're going to have to pay at least the first month's rent up front. That can be as much as $3,000. And a lot of people are surprised to learn when I tell them that in some cases you can actually get into a house for around $3,000, $5,000 maybe. So the difference in upfront costs can be substantial, but a lot of times they're not. Now, for those of you who are out there and you're saying, well, what about down payments? Well, we actually have down payment programs that allow you to avoid making a large down payment. You can get into some houses for no money down, or even a smaller down payment like 3.5%. So another video for another day, maybe a financing video, but generally speaking, rentals are going to have a little less upfront cost associated with them. Now, Let's talk about some cons with rent houses, okay? Con number one is generally you're going to pay more money per month for that property than you would for a comparable house that you own, okay? So when landlords buy properties, they're wanting to make money. It's not because they just love owning properties and letting other people live in them. It's because they're trying to make some money. So when you live in a rental, you're paying a mortgage, you're paying taxes, you're paying insurance, and you're paying a profit. Okay, the landlord is making money off of you. So that house that you might have been able to own for $1,000 a month, you're renting for $1,200, maybe $1,300 a month. So monthly cost for the same space is a big con of a rental house. Number two, you're building equity in someone else's asset. And that kind of ties into point number one with the cons. That's to say that when you're paying that mortgage, you're paying their note down for them, okay? So when they go to sell that house, they're taking some of the money that you gave them and they're going to put it in their pocket. So that's kind of another way, if you do own rental properties, that's another way you can make income, okay? Number three, you have no real say-so in what happens to the property. If you want to do anything, if you want to paint the walls or anything like that, you've got to get the landlord's permission. If you want to plant new flowers or something like that, you got to get the landlord's permission. So doing what you want with the property for some people can be a real big reason to own instead of renting. Not to mention the fact that, do you really want to spend the money to put new flooring in someone else's house? Probably not. You're going to tolerate that flooring. Whereas if it's your own house, if you want to swap out that old outdated carpet for some nice new vinyl plank, you can do that, no sweat. Number four, the final con for the rental column over here, is rent can increase dramatically based on current market conditions. And that's in contrast with owning a house where your payment will stay roughly the same for the life of the loan, at least your principal and interest. Now, your taxes and your insurance are guaranteed to go up. That's 100% going to be the case. But your principal and interest are going to stay the same. Now, with renting, you can expect to see at least a small increase each and every year. Now, some landlords are, I will say, really bad about raising rent. And if you, a little pro tip for my renters out there, if you do rent a house, be a good tenant, because landlords will pay to keep you. They will avoid raising rent to keep you in their house because they think you're a good tenant and they like to make you happy. So if you're renting, be a good tenant. Pay on time, take good care of the house. Landlords will bend over backwards to keep you around, I promise. They will avoid raising rent so that you'll stay. All right, so now we're going to talk about some of the pros of owning a house, okay? Some of the benefits that you get when you own a house. So, number one, you get to actually build equity in an asset that you own. Now, going back to what I was talking about rentals, when those landlords own those properties, you're hoping to pay down the principal on that note, right? So when you borrow money from a bank, you're borrowing an amount which is called the principal, and on top of that, they're going to charge you what's called interest as their fee for letting you use that money. Now, usually the interest is fairly low on a house loan, 3.5%. But if you run the thing through a loan calculator, you'll start to see that the interest payments are pretty substantial up front. The principal payments are fairly small. Now, as the loan goes along, okay, the amount of principal that you're paying versus the amount of interest increases. You pay more principal the older the loan gets. Now, the way you can get in front of that is you can pay a little extra toward the note each month, $25, $50. You run this through a loan calculator. If you just Google loan calculator, you'll find tons of them out there. Run the numbers and see what kind of a difference paying that extra $25 or $50 a month makes over the life of your loan. So you go back to the point we're making here, whereas you're building equity in your own asset, okay? You stay there for 5 years, you pay a little extra toward the principal. When you leave, you take that money with you. You get to use it to go buy the next house, and this is how you can climb the property ladder. You buy your first house, it's pretty modest, maybe spend $120,000, $130K, small house, nothing fancy, but then you build equity in it. You improve on it a little bit, okay? You add some nicer flooring, some good countertops, paint it, whatever it is, and then you go to sell it and you make a little money, okay? You can take that to your next house. So that's one big pro about owning your house, is when you leave, you take some money with you. When you're renting, no money leaves with you. Whatever you've paid, it's gone. Bye-bye. Okay? So, pro number two, you get to do whatever you want with the property, right? We talked about putting in those nicer countertops or painting it or whatever. That can be a source of appreciation in the property. You can actually make the property more valuable by improving it. And if you do the work yourself, you can make a substantial amount of money by working on this. It's kind of like doing a flip house, but living in it. Lots of folks do this. They'll buy a house that needs a little bit of work. They'll live in it for a couple or 3 years, and then they'll fix it up while they're there, sell it, and usually turn a nice little profit on the deal. So something to think about. Pro number 3 for buying a house. If you decide to move, you have a lot of options regarding what you want to do with the property. You can sell the property, or you can hold on to it and rent it. You've got that flexibility there, and if you don't need the money for your next purchase, you can actually just hold on to it and rent it. And you can be a landlord and then rent that property to someone else, let them keep paying on your principal while you earn money, okay? So there you go. There's your pros for buying a house. Now, buying a house is not the best solution for every situation, and it's not a silver bullet. Cons for buying a house. Let's talk about that a little bit, okay? They're generally more expensive up front. I'm just going to say it. Now, as I said a while ago, you can get into a house for no money down. Now, a lot of realtors won't tell you this, but I will, because frankly, I'm honest. Number one, buying a house is not an amazing investment, okay? I'll say it. It's not a great place to park your money. There are better investments out there. In the stock market, as of this recording, mid-December of 2020, you can make 25-30% in the stock market, no sweat, okay? So tying up 20-30 grand in a house, it's not the best thing. But we go back to that whole idea of you having to have somewhere to live. You've got to have a place to live. A house is a stable asset. It's a forgiving asset class. They seldom go down in value, and if they do, it's not by a ton. And generally speaking, over time, they keep up with inflation, if not outpacing it just a little bit. So your upfront costs in a house, are going to be more, but you can get into one for 0% down, and I'll get back to that real quick before we move on. 0% down loans are going to come with a higher interest rate. Okay, I'm just going to throw that out there. So if you are planning on buying a house, the smart thing to do is put a little bit of money down. You go into an FHA loan, you can pay 3.5%, or you can go conventional and pay as little as 5%. But on top of that, you've got to pay mortgage insurance. Okay, and that's a conversation for another day. We'll do a financing video to discuss those things. But it's not a silver bullet. Okay, there are cons to owning, and one of them is that it's generally more expensive up front than renting. Okay, you're going to have to put more money into it at the beginning. Number 2, when you buy or sell a house, there are transaction costs. Okay, there are many people who have jobs to do when it comes to buying or selling a house. The most visible are the realtors, people like myself. We do make money when people buy and sell houses. But a lot of work goes into that on our end. We're doing things behind the scenes that the buyers and sellers don't even see to make sure that the transaction goes smoothly, that there aren't any problems, and that our clients are getting the best deal possible. But beyond that, you've got home inspectors, you've got appraisers, you've got surveyors, you've got workers at the title company. All of these people have skin in the game when it comes to buying and selling a house, and so there are costs associated with doing real estate business. You have to factor that in, and that's one reason I tell people that if you're not going to be in the house for 5 years, you should probably not buy a house. Closing costs can cost for a buyer as much as $10,000, and for a seller as much as $30,000. Okay, closing costs can be very expensive, and they can fluctuate from that by a great deal based on many factors that are outside the scope of this video. But closing costs are a real thing, and they're something you've got to think about. And when you're owning property and you go to buy it or sell it, it does cost money. So transaction costs are a con when it comes to owning a house. Okay. Next, number 3, you are responsible for maintenance. Okay, nobody else. Now, there are things that you can do to help out with that. Home warranties are a great thing. I'm an advocate of them. I own home warranties on every property that I own. I think they help to normalize repair costs and that they can make things more predictable. Now, there are some years where I'm going to throw down that $600 and I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to use that home warranty for anything. But the next year, I might have my air conditioner go out. That could cost me as much as $7 or $8 grand. Home warranty hopefully will help out with that a little bit, depending on what goes wrong. Now, like anything else, they don't cover 100% of things, but it's better than nothing. So I encourage people to have home warranties. A lot of folks would disagree with me on that. But either way, you're responsible to some degree for the maintenance on that house. You've got to mow the yard, you've got to clean out the gutters, you got to keep it painted, you got to do this, you got to do that. There are things you got to do. Now, it's not as bad as a lot of people make it out to be. Okay, a lot of people, oh, home maintenance is really expensive. It's not that bad. If you stay on top of it and you keep an eye on things, it's not bad at all. Okay, so home maintenance, yeah, you're responsible for it. The fourth and final con that we'll talk about for buying in this video is you have less flexibility when it comes to picking up and moving. Okay, so the biggest reason to rent a house is that you have flexibility. The biggest reason to own a house is that you've got the ability to build equity in your own asset. When you do go to sell a house, there's less flexibility. It takes anywhere from at least 30 days, usually 40 in our market right now, but 40 up to infinity days to sell and close on a house. Depending on how you price it, you might sit on that property for a while. Now, I will tell you this, our market is really hot at this time, at mid-December of 2020, and we're selling houses really, really fast and for stupid money, okay? But that might not always be the case. Real estate markets go up, they go down, just like everything else. And at some point along the way, the real estate market is going to be tough again, and it's going to be hard for sellers to sell houses. And you might have a situation where you've got to leave town for a job or whatever it is, and you've got to sell this house. It's a little harder to be mobile when you own your own home, okay? So there you have it. There's pros and cons for buying houses. Like I said, the biggest pro for rent is flexibility. The biggest pro for owning is, basically paying yourself for living in the house instead of paying someone else. So I hope this video was helpful to you. Again, please click the like button, click the subscribe button. It would really help out our channel. We're trying to grow this thing and help as many people as possible. It's free real estate advice, guys. It's free education. So I hope it's all valuable to you. If you're in the local East Texas area and you need some help with real estate, my contact information is in the video description. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on my website, all those different places. Even if you're not in this area, I'll be glad to hook you up with somebody in your local area who can help you with whatever you need. Hope you guys are taking care. I hope you're staying safe, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye for now.